On leaving the meeting place, they came to Simon and Andrew's house, accompanied by James and John. Simon's mother in law was sick in bed, burning up with a fever. They told Jesus. He went to her, took her hand, and raised her up. No sooner had the fever left than she was up fixing dinner for them. That evening, after the sun was down, they brought sick and evil afflicted people to him. The whole city lined up at his door. He cured sick bodies and tormented spirits. Because the demons knew his true identity, he didn't let them say a word. While it was still night, way before dawn, he got up and went out to a secluded spot and prayed. Simon and those with him went looking for them. They found him and said, "Everybody's looking for you." Jesus said, "Let's go to the rest of the villages so I can preach there also. This is why I came." He went to their meeting places all through Galilee, preaching and throwing out the demons. The Gospel of the Lord. So today is the fifth Sunday of Epiphany, and we are still on the message series, Living into the Light of Jesus. Today we're going to look at two aspects of Jesus' life that can inform us in how we live into the light of Jesus. And one is Jesus is a healer. And so how can we be healers? And then two, Jesus practiced taking time away from his ministry and work so that he could focus on his relationship with God. So how might we do that to give us balance and respite and allow us to even in a more healthy way walk in the light of Jesus? So we're still on the first chapter of Mark for today's lesson. Mark is the shortest book. You probably know that, the shortest gospel of the four gospels. And the word, it moves really fast. I mean, if you think about it, we're only, I think, on verse 29 or something. Let's see. Yeah, 29. We're on verse 29. And we've already done quite a bit. Jesus has called the four Simon and his brother and James and John, and they've gone to stay in Capernaum, and Jesus has preached at the synagogue, and he's exorcised a demon from a man at the synagogue. And now today, in today's lesson, he's healing Simon's mother-in-law, and then he ends up healing a number of people from the town. So let's slow down a little bit so that we can focus on these 10 verses, 29 to 39, and look for some particulars and how they might inform us as we walk in the light of Jesus. There is thought, or actually, I don't know if it's proven or not, but I've read a good bit about it, that they know that Simon's home was in Capernaum, and that his home, they believe, was right next door to a synagogue. And so when the service is over, it's pretty easy for everybody in the extended family, Simon and Andrew, James and John, and all the rest, to go just next door to Peter's house after the service. And when they got there, Peter's mother-in-law was really sick with a fever. And back in those days, before antibiotics, it was pretty, it could be pretty lethal to have be burning up with a fever. I mean, usually a fever is a sign of a big infection, and infections can kill you pretty easily if you're not careful. And so Jesus goes to her, takes her hand, and raises her up, and immediately she's healed. And we know that she's healed because she immediately, they use this word a lot in the Gospel of Mark, immediately she starts doing the host thing as probably the matriarch of the house, and fixing everybody dinner. So they that they're on the Sabbath. And it is kind of interesting, you know, people always fuss about Jesus doing things on the Sabbath. Well, right straight away in the Gospel of Mark, he doesn't really deal with that much. You remember he already exorcised somebody on the Sabbath, and now he's healed Simon's mother-in-law. And when the sun goes down, though, on this day, the Sabbath is ended. And immediately the whole town who had heard about Jesus's works comes to Simon Peter's door and want healing. And so he healed a bunch of people, everybody that came there. And they don't say how many or how late he was up doing it, but we know he started it after sundown, and we know there was a great number of people. And this is pretty typical for Jesus because we know Jesus as a healer. We know that a good part of his ministry was healing ministry. And in this particular passage, he gently takes Peter's mother-in-law's hand. He raises her up. He's doing this in a culture that you don't even touch women that are not in your own family. And we know from reading scripture that he does this a lot. He knows the power of human touch, and he touches people. He goes where they are, and it doesn't matter if they have leprosy or if they're deemed unclean or whatever. He's with people. He doesn't back away from them. So we learn a few things about being healers from Jesus just right away. First of all, he does not shy away from those who are suffering. He doesn't cross the street or look the other way or pretend it's not happening. He engages them, he talks to them, he looks them in the eye, he respects them as children of God, and he cares for them, and he shows them compassion, and he touches them. Again, there's great power in human touch. There's great healing power in taking time to listen. There's great healing power in practicing compassion and mercy. We are called to walk in the light of Jesus. So we are also called to be like him. We're called to use our own unique gifts, whatever they may be, to heal others. We may be doctors or nurses, but we also might be chaplains, or we might be attorneys. We might be teachers. We might be friends or neighbors, or we might simply notice that a stranger needs attention. So we, like Jesus, take the time to meet them, see them, touch them, care for them, and help them recover from whatever is keeping them from their best self. Jesus is gentle with Peter's mother-in-law, but you may recall last week when he exorcises the demon in the synagogue and heals that person, that he was downright confrontational. He spoke with authority, and he didn't back off. And sometimes healing happens like that. We don't back down from holding up a vision of how another person can be healed. Scripture doesn't say how far into the evening he continued to heal people, but it's implied he spent some significant time, as many in Capernaum came to be healed and restored by his efforts. Again, healing is a big part of Jesus' journey and ministry. He helped people find wholeness, and he knew they needed health and well-being as well as spiritual tending. And I invite you this evening to consider how you help others towards wellness. How do you directly help others recover and experience health, wholeness, and well-being? The second action that Jesus takes in these short 10 verses is that he rises early while it's still dark, before daylight, and goes off by himself to pray. There's several stories throughout Jesus's life about him taking time out to go away by himself and pray. In the Gospel of Mark, we hear of Jesus doing the ministry of healing and then taking time away so that he can recover and recharge and reconnect with God directly. There are those who are called to follow Jesus who might lean into the aspect of being a healer, a servant, working towards people's wellness. And then there are others that might lean towards the component of respite, meditation, prayer, listening. Jesus is clear how important both aspects of ministry are for those who follow him. No matter how great or overwhelming the need at the present time, like him, with all the town coming to him, we must take time away for restoration and respite and for prayer and to focus on our relationship with God regularly and consistently. And here are a few nuggets about that. Even though he worked late the night before, he rises early before dawn to find a quiet place to pray. Spending time with God was more important to him than sleep in this particular case. Early morning is a great time to spend in prayer. I think most of us know that. And I don't know why. Maybe because it's quieter. Maybe because others are not stirring to distract us. Maybe because it orients our day, gets our head on straight before we meet the day and gets us aligned with God. Or maybe it's that time between sleep and wakefulness when we're more receptive to God's directions. But early morning routines, which include prayer and scripture study, are powerful practices. And they serve to transform our lives into the person that we aspire to be. It's a well-known time that's life-changing and promoted by productivity gurus as well as spiritual gurus because it's just such a beneficial time. All prayer time is important. All prayer time works, but there's something about that early morning time with God that just helps us in a deep, deep way. In scripture, we find that Jesus does take retreats, that he goes away for 2 or 3 days to pray. He goes to a quiet place or a deserted place or up on the mountain. But in this passage, I want to point out that we learn that he has a daily practice of prayer. He has a daily practice of prayer. No matter how late he's out the night before, he begins his day with God. Jesus doesn't lose his spiritual guidance in the face of the overwhelming needs of others or what other people's perceptions of what he should do or shouldn't do happen to be. He keeps his strong commitment to God. And I think this is a really important point. Think about how many people in Capernaum needed his healing presence. Scripture says that he never loses his compassion for people, but he always follows the guidance he knows is God's calling for him. He doesn't deviate in those 3 years of ministry. He does not deviate from what he knows that he's discerned in prayer. God's call for him is. Even though throughout his ministry, beginning with these verses today, others try to pull him away from that. So just imagine if you were Simon and you wake up and you have this idea, oh my gosh, we've amassed these crowds, we're going to have more crowds today, we're going to do lots of great things, and you go to get Jesus up to come to breakfast and he's not there. And the scripture uses a word in Greek, a Greek word that basically says they hunted him. And it comes across as really a way that conveys frustration, that Simon and the others were very, very frustrated with Jesus for taking off and not telling anybody where he went. And especially because they knew they were going to have this grand day in Capernaum that would probably even be more so than what had happened the night before. And Jesus is nowhere to be found. So they look for him. They finally find him. And Simon Peter says, you know, we have been hunting for you. We've been looking for you. You know, this is important for us. And so, sorry. And Jesus doesn't get distracted by that. He just says, you know, we need to go to these other towns. We're not going to stay in Capernaum. We're going to go throughout Galilee, and we're going to teach and preach and heal at these other places. He does not succumb to what others felt he should do, or what they needed him to do, or what they expected him to do. He knows that he can't do it all. And he knows that sometimes you have to move on and go where the Spirit calls you. So I think that's a good piece for us to think about, especially people who are in ministry, people who are in the healing business, people who are in the proclamation business, the people who are walking in the light of Jesus, trying to share what Jesus is about with other people. We need to recognize that we have to balance our ministry, our healing ministry, our ministry of working toward the well-being of others. We need to balance that with taking care of ourselves and making sure our connection with God is in alignment, and making sure that we are putting priority, if you will, on that connection. Because when we don't, and you've seen this, we can get far off track, even in the service of ministry. We can, our egos take over, or we get messed up in something else. So it's just critical. And Jesus shows us this in just 10 verses. He says, okay, we have to pray every day. We have to be consistent. We have to have a prayer practice. And we have to focus on healing people and getting rid of their demons and serving other people. But we have to do it in balance. We have to do it in balance. So again, some folks may orient their lives toward prayer, time, and respite, and others orient their lives towards service. I think it just depends on our personality. But if we just go down one road or the other, we're missing the whole point of these verses for us today. We need both. I'll reiterate that. We need both. As we walk in the light of Jesus, as we walk this earth as his hands and his feet and his eyes and his ears, are we taking time each day to balance ourselves and our service with prayer and alone time with God? Or are we just too busy for that? And as we walk in the light of Jesus, as we walk this earth as his hands and his feet and his eyes and his ears, are we paying attention to those in our path who need the comfort of a healing touch, or a listening ear, or guidance, or help with their well-being in some way or another? Or are we just too distracted with our own agendas to pay attention to that? Jesus' model for ministry is a model for self-care as well as a model for other care. Jesus guides us today in the lesson that we've read, letting us know that both are critical to the fulfillment of divine love and light in our world. So I invite you now for a time